beyond the metaphor. A single word can evoke a response from almost any person in the Western world. Jesus. What is his story? What was his life? Why are we still talking about him? A search for facts among fairy tales, myths, distortions, and gospels leaves one with words developed to explain the unexplainable. Metaphor, imagination, parable, and paradox. Jesus is the collection of stories made of metaphorized memory we engage in with our imaginations to translate the parables of then to our now in order to see our own paradox of life and death. He was a healer, a preacher, and a wisdom teacher who lived a life of compassion for those around him and called to those in charge for greater justice. But it's not a literal story. His events are not to be traced on a timeline, but encountered in the personal and vulnerable way he experienced Abba. Him speaking to you. Him speaking to me. If you can't live in his parables, if you cannot imagine a radically different ending to the parable challenges you see in your world today, you will not be able to join him on his path. For Abba's is a mystical covenant, always seeking, always open, always ready to love.
Reign of God over under Roman domination.
Jesus looked around and asked his community, "How'd we end up back in Egypt?" Suffering was known to Jews of Galilee in the 20s. Revolts against Rome had meant more soldier occupation than ever. He would have had an easier time being just less Jewish, or at least to be Jewish in a way that was in cooperation with other powerful Jews. But he learned the prophets' lessons, prepared himself for his journey in the desert, and found strength to speak of Yahweh in a whole new language of personal relationship, no matter the cost. His was a normal crucifixion. Normal?
Yes, normal.
Many people suffered his fate both before and after him. It was the same domination system still in place today. For the hungry mother who can't find a job to feed her children, to the sex slaves in India, and the veterans whose bodies and mind have been mutilated from a war we are finally admitting we're ashamed we ever started. He was homeless, sharing whatever anyone was willing to give him for a day's work with all of those around him, including women who had to give their bodies to be used because they were given nothing else, and people whose families had betrayed them because they caught a skin virus. For those who had never known compassion, who had every reason to think life was without hope, Jesus brought new life. He participated in their resurrections, and each person who saw for the first time was ready to be a part of the life here and now that God had given them. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. No. Sadly, for some listening, I'm not sure that the wealthy afterlife where you get to have everything you want exists. Heaven is for here and now, when life finally means something to you. Broad and narrow, self and others, emptiness and suffering.
Why do I keep getting lost? I'm a good, kind, middle-class person who gives some money here and there. I don't actively hurt people. I do my taxes, and I don't break the laws, and teach my kids about recycling, and drive a hybrid car. I.
It's the first thing when we wake up and the last thing when we go to bed. Lords of convention today say, tweet your feelings for friends to see, and how many likes can you get? His was a path of nonviolent resistance, the hardest choice, the one that means confidence and humility, vulnerability and strength, to carry enough love for others that your spirit is more than an experience for just you.
He was a community organizer
That knew the symbols of his time, like bus boycotts and sit-ins. He knew what would speak volumes to his world. Donkeys and temple conflict invoked of his commitment to claim God's lordship, an unpopular stance in any time period. He knew it was coming. Maybe not the night before. Maybe Judas was real, maybe he's been scapegoated. But Jesus knew, from the normal crucifixions before and after his time, this was an ending he chose. Subversive vulnerability, paradox in transformation. Naked, shamed, beaten, tortured, a failure, and fully divine. That this should be the man who is resurrected is a shocking statement. You cannot explain, only experience the word resurrection. It's like trying to describe the sun to someone who's only lived underground. His resurrection, like his experience of Abba, is a mystical one. You cannot unknow him. He is always alive for you. It was early in the morning. Her face was crusted from tears and snot and dirt. She had not been with any men since he had been taken, and she didn't know where she was going to get her next meal. She didn't care. She had to see him before she left. She was at her lowest. She was empty. The best person she had ever known was dead. Mary, why are you crying? He was there. Who knows how? Stop asking. Stop missing the way your heart skipped when he called her by name, when he calls you by name, when he calls me by name. Hear and be freed. Because there never was a veil. Because death never was the end. Life is for now and always. We are resurrection people. It is not just he, but me that is risen from the dead.
He is she, is me. The divine feminine as more than the Holy Spirit.
He was a man in a time and space. What he spoke about was relevant then and is relevant now because it reveals the reign of God. Once you know the story, you have to live it. The people